All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live for the 60th episode of Kayfabe with Keaton. And what a great guest we have coming in here. None other than pro wrestling legend who's faced some of the best names in pro wrestling like Dean Malenko, Jeff Jarrett, and the shared locker rooms with the likes of Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan. Let's waste no time and bring him in. WCW superstar Casey Thompson.
Hey, thanks for having me, Keaton.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, no problem. It's a pleasure.
Uh, we'll just start from the start here. So, how's your day? First of all, how's your day been?
Oh, it's all good. It's the weather's beautiful. It's a nice Sunday afternoon here in Florida.
Awesome. And your podcast is going very well as well at the minute. I researched a lot about you and realized that you haven't left the wrestling world. You're still doing podcasts and stuff. So I just want to give you a wee bit of promotion here. So you can follow Casey Thompson and
Yeah.
see his podcast on all of his socials and YouTube. All the same name, the In Ring Podcast with Casey Thompson. So I want to start from the start here, Casey. So what's
Sure.
your very first memory of wrestling?
Um, as a kid, I was my parents in the '70s before I was born. My parents always were big wrestling fans. Always went to the matches. I'm at live, sat first row. I had pictures of my dad in the ring, sweeping the ring from people throwing stuff in it and everything. So wrestling has always been in my life, but then we moved down to South Florida when I was younger, and my parents are watching old Madison Square Garden Network with old WWF, and I was just like, this stuff's garbage. I didn't care for it. And then one day, Saturday afternoon, Championship Wrestling from Florida with Gordon Soley, Dusty Rhodes was there, and then Blackjack Mulligan, and I just heard the names, I heard the interviews, I saw it, and I was just hooked. And so that was probably 10, 11 years old, and ever since then I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a professional wrestler, and the rest is now it's in the history books.
So from seeing that moment, that's when you realized you wanted to be a pro wrestler, or to build up over time.
No, I mean immediately. I mean that's all I ever wanted to do. I dreamed about. I would make. I mean, I got so involved. I remember my parents. We grew up kind of poor, didn't have a lot. So I remember one time I saw in the newspaper they had an advertisement for the matches. And the main event was Dusty Rhodes versus Abdullah the Butcher. And so I told my parents, and I seen my parents in the kitchen looking at the checkbook, see how much money they had in the bank account, and um, my dad's shaking his head. My mom has had that finger going, and my mom won. So she said, "You're taking the boys." So me and my brother and dad loaded up and went to the wrestling matches. And I mean, I was just obsessed with it. That's all I ever, talked about. I mean, I drove people crazy. That's all I ever wanted to do. And it got to the point where I met an old time wrestler who was the ring guy now. He's like a real serious shooter back in the day. His name's Gordon Nelson. He used to set up the rings for Florida wrestling. So I used to go to, this was down in Fort Myers. I used to go down to the Lee County Civic Center there and set up the ring when I was 11, 12 years old. And I would help set it up. They had a steel cage. I would help set it up. And and then it evolved to the promoter was a guy. He used to be a commentator on Florida wrestling on one of their syndicated programs. His name's Coach John Heath. He would send me the posters for the city, and I would poster the town with the old school, the yellow and white posters and all that. They had the concert post. I used to poster it, and I remember one show got canceled. I was really bummed out, but I had 200 of those cardboard posters. So I just started cutting them up and making championship belts then. So I mean, ever since I was just hooked, and then it just developed into eventually I was 15 years old at school. I still everything was about wrestling, but I did every sport there was, played everything. And there was a flyer up on the wall at my school, for a independent show that was going to be across the street at the Central Florida Fairgrounds, and it said "Learn to be a professional wrestler." So I was always a big kid, so I was like, I was always lifting weights and everything. So I was close to about 200 pounds then, maybe 175, buck 85, something like that. So I went over and my dad had to sign off on me and I started training. And I trained for a solid year before I had my first match. And, you know, so then, it was tough. It was brutal. I mean, I played every sport there was, but it was a grind to learn the trait and to, get my first match and everything. But I mean, it was great. Ever since then, it's just that's all it was.
Yeah, and you mentioned there like being able to be a part of something, like being a part of a promotion and promoting things and stuff. But I can understand why that happened. But wrestling at the age of 15, did was there anyone that was kind of like, get lost, you shouldn't be doing this, or was
Oh
everyone
yeah,
pretty accepting of it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I had guys out there trying to, stretch me. So if I didn't fight back, they're just gonna just beat me up and just take advantage of me. And I was fortunate enough that the guy who trained me was an old territory guy, a guy named Golden Boy Jerry Gray. He kind of smartened me up and was like, "Hey, fight back! Don't let them do that and this and that." So he was the one who he trained me, but he also ran the promotion that I wrestled for then. So he placed me with an old school guy, and we were wrestling then when I first started 3 days a week. Friday, Saturday, and Sundays every week, 3 days a week. So he put me with an old time guy, Bugsy McGraw. And so Bugsy, he's 80 years old now. So I mean, he's 81. He had a birthday yesterday. So happy birthday, Bugsy! I called and talked to him. Still, I was over at his house last week. So he broke me into business, and I mean, this guy sold out Madison Square Garden, main evented against Bruno Sammartino for the WWF World Title back in the late '60s. So I mean, he's a real deal guy. So he's a big guy, and we'd be in there, and he's like, "All right, hit me, kid, hit me harder, harder, harder." I'm like, "I can't hit you any harder. I'm gonna be punching you for real." So, but I remember when my first song, he's like, "Hey, kid, we're in the dressing room. You know how to throw a forearm?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." So he showed me. So I threw the forearm. He's like, "No." So about an hour later, my chest was completely bruised. I could throw a forearm. So that's how he was. And then he took an interest in me. He would come up. He lived in outside of Tampa, so he would come up, drive the hour and a half to work with me. We had access to a ring and everything, so he worked with me and a couple of other guys. There's two brothers that both passed away, but they would all four of us would work out all the time. But so I was always with Bugsy, so I got broken in by him, and so it was I got a step above everyone to have that kind of experience and to you know have someone like him with his knowledge to and was willing to teach me, and because I was respectful, I listened to him. I didn't talk back. I closed my mouth and opened my ears. That's the key in wrestling.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're able to train with some of these legends early on. Um, I thought at that I actually thought at that time they wouldn't have taken anyone under 16 because I thought it was normally only the promoter's son that got it.
I mean, I guess I was just fortunate to be able to do that. So Um, I mean, I don't know. It wasn't easy by any means. I mean, my parents would have to drive me to the matches until I was 16, where I was able to get my own license and drive. So it was exciting. It was fun. A lot of hard work. So, but I never stopped, and I just kept on going, going, and going. And I was fortunate enough to um, a few years after that. I always still wrestle, but if I was home, I'd go in to a training facility and help out or just go there practice. Always working to perfect my craft. So Blackjack Mulligan. So he is. I don't know if you know who he is. He's
Yeah,
the
I know who he
father of
is.
Barry Windham. His son-in-law is Mike Rotunda, which he's sick right
Yeah,
now, so we're all praying for him. And which he's the grandfather of the late Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas and everything. So Blackjack Mulligan, which is an icon, big man in the wrestling business, he had a training facility at the old Eddie Graham Sports Stadium where, it's an iconic wrestling building. I mean, Ric Flair wrestled there, Andre the Giant, Elvis Presley sang there. I had the honor of wrestling the last match ever there before they tore the building down and built some apartment
Awesome.
complexes against Blackjack Mulligan, which happened to be Blackjack's last match ever also. So I was around Blackjack for about 5 years, helping training people at his school, traveling. We were still wrestling all the time. So we were traveling, coming back, training guys. And so I went from having Bugsy breaking me in. Then I started, learning from Blackjack Mulligan, which is probably one of, top guys ever on the mic talking. He was with Dusty Rhodes, Superstar, all the greats in wrestling. Blackjack was around, I mean, look at his family, look at the lineage there. So, and I was just like family with him. And so, I mean, I went on and just, anytime there was something out there, and I'd always network and try to move up a little bit further on that list, and, to learn and to go places. And then he would send me out to places to wrestle. So, it was, I've been fortunate. I've had a few guys like that that's really helped me over my years of wrestling. And there's no regrets, no complaints.
Yeah, that just shows the trust that you had with such a legend like Blackjack Mulligan to be able to train his guys and stuff like that. That's just amazing. But when you started training, and you mentioned that you kind of kept your mouth shut, ears open, and that's a very big thing in wrestling. A lot of people say that, but when you were training, now that you go on in your career, now that you went on in your career, what was one thing that you got from these legends, and one piece of advice that you took on forever?
Don't take anything for granted. Always the wrestling business is really weird. You never know what's going to happen and what's not. So you always have to take something, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. Because if not, you might miss out on a great opportunity and someone else might, get. So just work ethic, always to believe in yourself, always keep working harder. And, and I do it, to this day, my son, he was a Division I wrestler in college. Now he's a police officer down in South Florida, and he was the same way. Very good work ethic, always. And you have a good work ethic, and you're respectful. A lot of these old time guys, legends, are going to, they're gonna say, you know what, I like that kid. Let me see if I can help him a little bit. And you'd be surprised at the littlest thing, walking up saying, "How you doing, sir?" and shaking his hand. Or if he walks in, and you're sitting there and there's no more chairs, you get up and say, "Here you go, sir, have my chair. How you doing? My name's Casey," and this and that. And he's like, respect goes a long way in the business.
Yeah, and you kind of followed that, but and also working with some of these guys, maybe when you were training with them or something, what do you think you took out of it the most?
Just always just work hard. If you don't know something, ask. Don't act like you know everything. One of the biggest things is in wrestling, less is better. You don't always have to go 100 miles an hour to get your point across. You can
Exactly.
do less if you know how to, convey it, get it across. You can get it across better, and without doing a million different moves and stuff, I can get the same point across.
Exactly. Like you could have an amazing match with Will Ospreay or with and Ricochet, and you could do as many
Yeah,
flips as possible. But if it doesn't have story, it's not going to be good. That's why you need to have more of a
yeah,
story, and less is more and more.
definitely. Wrestling, calling a wrestling match is like riding a roller coaster. And you get on and you don't know what's going to come next, and all of a sudden there's a quick turn and then a drop, and then it goes upside down, and then it slows down, and then it speeds up. So all the way into the finish in the end. So that's how I always would set up a wrestling match when I wrestled. Is I would, and don't get me wrong, when I first started, I would say, I was wrestling these guys. I'd say, "How you doing? I'm wrestling you tonight. What would you like to do?" I would never say, "Hey, we're wrestling. I want to do this, this, and this." No, you show the respect. We're working tonight. What do you want to do? And then, we might, if they say, "What do you like to do?" then we'll work it in. And that's how it all was back in the day. Especially when I started wrestling, my first matches on WCW. I'm out there doing the job. My job is to put the guy over. So I'm not going to walk up and say, expect to do all kinds of stuff and things like that. You're going to go out there and listen, and you're going to learn. And sometimes you're going to have a good match. Sometimes you're going to get killed. But I've learned a lot from going out there and getting killed during a 3-minute squash match. There's a lot to learn. Knowing where to be at the right time and things like that. So I was fortunate enough to be against some of the greats ever in the business. I'm looking at your pictures behind you. You have Sting right there. I
Yep.
wrestled against Sting and Lex Luger in a tag team match, Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, Ric Flair. I used a bunch of different names, Casey Thompson. First, I started
Best
off
to
as
say,
Carl
Pete.
Robinson. Then I went to Casey Thompson. Then WWF, I was Mike Casey. So my first time in WWF, it's a funny story. The two brothers I talked about earlier that worked out with me and Bugsy, they were booked on the WWF show. We all did WCW, but they were on WWF. We're like, oh man! So I rode with them. I said, what's the worst? It's a 2-day show. The hotels are paid for, the gas is paid for, all by WWF. Worst case is I go up there and watch 2 days of wrestling and eat the catering for free. So I went up the first day. It was a double shot. We're doing Pensacola, Florida. The second day was Biloxi, Mississippi. So the first day I went there, I brought my bag and everything. There was nothing for me. So I went the next day, came in, same thing with my bag, walked in, and one of the agents, the road agents, Tony Gurria, was like, hey, who can do Legion of Doom's finish? Who can do Legion of Doom's finish? And no one was saying anything. And I'm like, I can do it. He's like, all right, well, you're booked against Legion of Doom. I'm like, well, I'm not even on the show. He's like, you are now. I said, yes, sir. He said, what's your name? I'm like, Casey. He's like, oh, what do you want to use? I'm like, back in those days, you were always worried about using your real name um, because you thought it would hurt you on other shows and stuff. So he's like, use Mike Casey. That's always a good name. I'm like, okay, no problem. And I'll get to that in a minute. When he walked away, I looked at my buddies and I'm like, hey, what's Legion of Doom's finish? I didn't even know what it was. And they're like, oh, it's a
Yes.
Doomsday device. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't worry about it because I was confident in my ability that I could do anything they asked me to do. So when we got there, we were in the back, we're talking. Animals like, hey, listen, I'm going to go underneath you. I'll give you the Iggy. So when I give you the Iggy, you do like a calf raise. I'll pop up like playing chicken in the pool. He says, and you don't need to do nothing else because then um, um, Mike, Animal's going to come off the top rope with a clothesline. And he said, you'll do a flip, boom, easy peasy, in and out. I said, all right. But me, I always like to add a little bit extra because I wanted to stand out because you can stand out by losing a match. Because the guys in the back are going to be like, oh, shit, that guy's good. I want to work him. He takes good bumps. He's always where he needs to be. His placement's good. So they see that, and then they tell the guy booking you, hey, bring that guy up again because I want to work him. So you get more and more work. Next thing you know, you're working all the time, and it leads into a bunch of good things. So I like pushed off Animal's head. So I did when he clotheslined me, I pushed off. When he bumped my feet up, I did 1, 2, 3.5 and landed on my belly. And it was so like, everyone jumped out of their chair when they seen it. It looked so devastating. So right then, that little clip right there was on the scissor reel going into Survivor Series into WrestleMania that year. They showed it every time LOD, whoop, there's me doing a bunch of flips, landing on the belly. So after that, they booked me all the time, anytime they were in the somewhere, drivable in the South. So I got to wrestle a lot for them. So and it was all about, you know, putting yourself out there, you know, being respectful, always having your gear with you, no matter where you go. So, so going back to what I said, so then as you can see, a lot of my matches were Casey Thompson with WCW. You'll see me, Dean Malenko, like you said, Jeff Jarrett, Alex Wright, Chavo Guerrero. Tons and tons of matches. Public Enemy. It goes on and on and on. So, the Armstrongs, Brad Armstrong, all of his brothers, Scott Armstrong, which was ended up being a referee for WWE, and then you had Steve Armstrong, which was with Tracy Smothers. They're the Young Pistols, and then they had Brian Armstrong, which is Road Dogg, and then the dad, which is Bob Armstrong, the Bullet, which he's a legend. So I used to wrestle in Alabama a lot for Steve Armstrong, and he's like, yeah, man. He's like, you're on TV every week. He's like, he said, I don't care if you're losing or winning or losing. He said, you're on TV every week, so everyone knows who you are. If they watch wrestling, people come to the shows, know who you are. He says, use your real name. So I did. I changed it. Always used Casey Thompson after that because that's who I am. Why not? It doesn't matter if I'm winning or losing. It's the thing is, I'm wrestling. I'm out there. I'm on TV every week. So I used to so I wrestled a lot of shows in Alabama. So I traveled from Florida to Alabama to wrestle. Always wrestled Steven Scott, and I'm one of the very few people in the whole entire world to have wrestled all the brothers, Brad, Steve, Scott, and Brian, and the dad, the Bullet, Bob Armstrong. So I wrestled all of them. I remember the day I wrestled them. I walked into the hotel. They're all in there smoking weed and everything. And I was just like, oh, okay. So I walked in. I'm like, hey, how you doing, sir? He's like, hey, man, I hear we're working tonight. I said, yes, sir. He said, what do you want to do? I said, why don't we start off slow and taper down from there? He's like, sounds good to me. He says, just don't hurt me. I've heard about you. I'm like, don't worry. I got you. We're all good. Because I was always tight and stiff in the ring. So we had a really good match. It was just an honor to be in the ring against a legend like that. It's funny when you sit there and watch and you're like looking, it's like, man, I grew up watching him on TV to be able to share the ring with him in a competitive, it's just in a match was just like, it's like, a dream coming true. And I've had so many of my dreams come true in that regards over my career that, sometimes I just got to pinch myself to make sure it's a real deal.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when you mentioned there, working with some of them legends like the Armstrongs, you mentioned Jeff Jarrett, Dean Malenko, Alex Wright. So you worked with some of the best wrestlers that the wrestling has actually ever seen. So did you ever feel any imposter syndrome being in the ring with some people and, think to yourself, I'm not supposed to be here?
No, I was confident. I had a good training in my ability. Later on in my career, at a certain point, I was real fortunate because in 1996, WCW, we used to always go to Atlanta every week at Center Stage. I'm sure you've heard of that place. Freaking shithole, nasty, cold. It was so bad to get people to come in the building. The homeless people would come there to watch the matches. So the WCW would give them T-shirts to wear, and if they stayed for the whole entire show, they got like a bag lunch. They fed them too. So they came in for free. They got off the streets to get warm. They got a free shirt, and they got food if they stayed for the whole taping. That's how bad it was to get people to come to Center Stage. So, so I wrestled. I wrestled there. Um, oh, yeah. So what was the question? I kind of lost it for a second. I went on something else.
It was, did you ever feel any imposter syndrome going into the ring, like thinking I'm not supposed to be here with all these legends?
No, I mean, like I was saying, I had my good training, and sometimes I was like, I felt like I wasn't ready to be a top guy, you know. But then I got to a certain point. Okay, like this one I was talking about, 1996. The everything was started in Atlanta at Center Stage. That's what I was talking about. I'm sorry. In 1996, the Olympic Games were in Atlanta. So every broadcast camera, lights, everything was for the Olympics. So Eric Bischoff was like, you know what? We have to do something. We can't stop wrestling. So they moved the whole entire production down to Disney MGM Studios. So they had one of the sound stages in. So what they do is WCW had so many syndicated shows like overseas and stuff like that that they wrestle. They had to tape so much. So there's matches that I've wrestled that I've never even seen that were all for like India or the UK or different places like that. And so we would do 3 weeks straight, and we would do 3 or 4 shows a day. So that's in remember I said there's a couple more people that really helped my career. So now we're in 1996. We're in there. A really, really good friend of mine I met when I first started when I was 15 years old was Kevin Sullivan. So Kevin Sullivan was the booker for WCW, and Kevin was a dear friend of mine until the day he died. He lived down in the Keys in South Florida. I used to go down there, stay with him, stay at his in his guest house. We traveled the around the world together. Then he moved out to Washington State, outside of Seattle. I used to go visit him in his house out there. Had some of the greatest times with Kevin. He was actually a business partner in one of my promotions I ran. So I mean, and Kevin Sullivan's one of the greatest minds ever in the business. And I had
It's
the
awesome.
opportunity to sit there to talk to him on the phone for hours, hundreds of hours on the phone, learn about the psychology of the business, why to do what, when, where, how, learn about all the old stories you hear about, the different territories and all that. So Kevin was the booker. So Kevin's like told Terry Taylor and that was the matchmaker and Mike Graham
Yeah.
and Paul Orndorff, hey, put him on everything and take care of him. So he did. I'd wrestle if we had 4 shows. I wrestled 4 times a day. So I was wrestling a lot, and I happened to live in Orlando at the time. So, but I still stayed in the hotel because there's so much fun going on. Afterwards, at the bars and hanging out, fishing. I mean, so much stuff. So, but we all became real close because we were there for like 3 weeks. At one point, everyone stayed at the Marriott Residence Inn, and everyone bring their families because the rooms were like condos and everything. So and then a few years after that, I got into like the best shape of my life where I felt that I could be my workability, my look, everything, my gear, you name it. I could be in there with The Rock. I could be in there with Stone Cold. I can be in there with any one of them and be comparable and look real. It looked like I belong there. So it took 10 years to get to that level because it doesn't just happen overnight. But a few people like Kurt Angle is one of them. It did, but it took a few years to really feel like I belonged. And so to answer your question, I never felt inferior, but I did feel like I couldn't be a top guy until I was at that point where I was like, you know what, I belong. So but in that process, I got to wrestle, Steve Austin. There's not a lot of guys saying they wrestled Steve Austin. So I've unfortunately I wrestled Big Van Vader more than probably any one other person on TV.
Yeah, I
So
hear he was hard to work.
yeah, he was just you don't like to speak bad of the dead, but you know
Mm.
what? He was just an asshole, and I told it, and it's nothing I've never said to his face. We were wrestling at one of the Disney tapings, and it's a crazy story. So there's a rumor going around that Hogan's wrestling in a television match. So Hogan's going to wrestle a job guy. So everyone's talking about it. So I'm like, oh, I want that match because who wouldn't want to wrestle Hulk Hogan, right? Not that Hulk
Mm.
was a great worker; he was a great entertainer. So, but I still that would help, bring you up a little bit, right? Help, elevate you a little bit in the minds of the wrestling community. So I was like, how can I get this match? So I'm like, oh, you know what? Hogan always uses um, Pee Wee Anderson.
Yeah,
Randy
his
Anderson was his
referee.
referee, all of his matches. So I went to Pee Wee and said, hey, Pee Wee, he's the rumor true? He's like, yeah. I said, so Hogan's wrestling a TV match? I'm like, yeah. I said, man, I'd love to have that match. He's like, yeah, you and everyone else. I said, yeah. I said, I'll give my payday for it. He's like, really? I'm like, yep. He says, for real? I said, swear to God. He's like, all right. He says, don't make me regret this. I said, I got you, bro. He said, all right, it'll be you. Next morning you come in, the board's already made up. It says Hulk Hogan versus In Ring, and that's where the name of my podcast come from. It said versus Casey Thompson. So everyone was like, "Oh shit, how are you wrestling? How'd you get that match with Hulk Hogan?" And I was just like, "Don't know." I said, "I guess he likes me," and they didn't know that I talked to Pee Wee and said, "Hey, I'll give you my payday for it." And then how wrestling is, things happen. They rewrite the show a million times. It came back and said, "Hey, listen." Hulk's going to wrestle with him and Savage are going to wrestle pretty wonderful Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma. And so I wrestled all those guys too, you know. So I said, all right. So they like have the day, they have this hour off. So I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm like, you know what? I'm getting paid no matter whether I work or not. So I got my bag. I said, I'm going to run out and go into the park and get some food and kind of sneak out of here. And so I'm like 1 foot out the door and I hear, Casey. I'm like, yes, sir. It was Terry Taylor. Where are you going? I said, nowhere. I'm off. He's like, no, we got your match now. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, who you got? He's like, yeah, you got Vader. I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. I've wrestled a million times. So we're out there. He comes up to me has me in the corner and he's throwing those big old haymakers. Boom, boom, boom. And I had hair back then. You could see my hair just every time he hit me. And I'm just like this, just rolling back and forth, rolling the punches. And he's tagging me and my hair just got bigger and bigger and bigger after that series of punches that my hair was all out of place and everything. And you know how you see in cartoons when someone hits you and they say, bam, and you see lightning bolts? I was feeling that and seeing all that. That's how hard he's hitting you. He's throwing those big old things and hit me really close in the corner. So, you know, I'm not going to go down to my butt because then he would start kneeing me in the face and break my nose and knock out my tooth or something. So I was at the point where I was like, you know what? I'm so over this guy. He's such a bully, such an asshole to everyone. So we got into the back, into like it's like actually after the gorilla position, there's like a little staging area. So I waited back there. The only people there were the ring announcer, David Penzer, and another wrestler named Nasty Ned Brady. And Vader came back, and I was waiting for him. He came back. He's like, you all right, kid? I was like, man, what's your problem? He's like, what do you mean? I said, you know, you're supposed to take care of people in there. I said, you're a piece of shit. All you do is this, you know, you're throwing those. I said, learn how to work. You know, he's like, and he's kind of like, oh, I just put in this time, Ric Flair was the booker then. He's like, I just put you over with Flair. I said, I don't need you to put me over with anybody. I said, I'm here because they know what I can do. And I thought, and everyone else there thought that, okay, Vader's just going to kick my ass, right? And so I was like, you know what? Oh well, I guess I'll never wrestle here again or whatnot. I was to the point where I was up to here. I couldn't take it anymore. And he just put his head down. I said, you know, you're just a piece of shit. You need to learn how to work. And he just put his head down and just walked away. And Penzer and Nasty Ned Brady are like, wow, you know. And not 2 weeks later is when Vader smarted off the Paul Orndorff and they got into it in center stage. So, you know, it's just crazy. So, but you know, I got to work all those guys and everything, and so I mean, I was fortunate enough to share the ring with a lot of incredible guys, and not more than that is knowing them. Like I used to always room with Mike Enos. He was one of the Beverly Brothers, and Jerry Lynn. You know who Jerry Lynn is?
Yeah, I know Jerry Lynn.
Yeah, Jerry Lynn. Jerry Lynn's probably he was Mr. JL then under the mask in WCW. I used to always share a room with them because I wrestled Dick Slater and Mike Enos in a match, and Mike Enos was talking. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to do a reverse slam." I said, "Why don't you do the reverse slam off the top?" He's like, "Oh, I've never done that before." I said, "It's easy, bro." I said, "I'll make myself light." I said, "Get me up there, climb up." I said, "I'll post myself." It's like what they call it, like Razor Ramon does, bag of shit or something like that, whatever it's called, So he's like, "Oh, okay." And then Dick Slater comes and he's like, "Hey, man, why don't you want to take that bump you take?" Because I've worked Dickie a lot over the years, and I watched Muda do it once where they shoot you really hard face first into the corner, and you just kind of do a handstand off the top and go over the pole and everything. I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." And WCW, do you remember when they had that rotating ring?
Oh yeah.
On a stage, like about a 6-inch stage on top. They had the platform, then like the floor, then there's a
stage.
Yeah,
I know what you mean now.
Like, and it would go in circles. So it was close to the outside of the ring. So we get into the match and everything. It's time. So Mike does the reverse slam off the top. It went really well. As he was throwing me, unbeknownst to myself, my foot kicked the camera. And you can see a camera do boom. So, not knowing anything. So in there, and then Dickie's like, "Hey, you ready to take your bump?" I'm like, "Yep." He's like, "Here you go, kid." He throws me in. I do the handstand over to the top, boom, land right on top of Jackie Crockett, which was a very famous camera guy over the years. Jackie was cool. He's one of the boys. Land on top of him. That camera broke. Boom. In the ring, the pin 1, 2, 3. The referees all have IFBs and they get communications from the back. And so I hear, "Go to the booking office." And I'm like, "Okay." So I said, "Who, me?" And I think the referee was Nick Patrick. He's like, "All of you." I'm like, "Okay." And so I'm thinking, all right, you know what? I've been really working hard to try to get a contract, all this kind of stuff. So maybe they're seeing all this hard work. They're going to reward me, right? So I get to the back there because we're still in the ring selling. They leave when their music on the out. They go to the booking office. So I walk into the booking office. As I walk in, they're slide right behind me. Mike Enos looked at me and said, "Hey, man, all the drinks are on me tonight at the bar." And I looked and said, "Oh, shit, I guess I'm not getting a contract." So inside the booking office, and it was probably like a 12 by 12, 14 by 14 square foot room, not a very big room. There was Kevin Sullivan, which was the head booker. Then you had Terry Taylor, Arn Anderson. These are all people on the booking committee, right? You had Eric Bischoff, the president of WCW, Hulk Hogan, Jimmy Hart. I think Mike Graham might have been in there. So Arn Anderson was doing all the talking. He's like, "Casey, we really appreciate all your work you do here for us. That's why you're here all the time." He says, "But we can't have you break in not one, but two $60,000 cameras in one match." I'm like, "Sorry?" He's like, "It's cheaper if you mess up the spot, redo it," because they used to do that back then. If you messed up the spot, they would just edit it out in post and the crowd would see it, but they wouldn't see it on TV. So it's cheaper to fix it in post. He says, "Hell," he said, "it's cheaper for you to hurt your body. It's cheaper for us to fix you than it is to buy those cameras." And I thought that was always kind of weird. I said, "Sorry, okay." He's like, "I have a question." I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "Am I still getting paid for today?" He's like, "Yes, you're still getting paid." I'm like, "Okay." So I was kind of down, like, "Oh man." You didn't realize I was good friends with Kevin Sullivan, right? So I didn't. This is like the last match of the day. I didn't see anyone and all that. So I don't drink, so I ended up becoming. I used to share rooms with Mike Enos and Jerry Lynn, and that's how I ended up becoming. Sharing rooms with them because Mike was going to buy the drinks, but I don't drink, so we became buddies. And I used to always just stay with them. So the next day at the tapings, I saw Paul Orndorff, and he walked in. Paul Orndorff, I don't know if you ever heard anyone ever talk about him, was a very,
Yeah, I know.
very intense person. Like everything was like that. And he's like, "You don't," he said, "I don't care if those camera guys are in your way. You kick those cameras. I hate the camera guys." I'm like, "Okay, Paul, cool. No problem." And so I'm like, I felt a little bit better. And then Kevin walked by and he's like, "Hey, baby, how many cameras are going to break today?" His old devil laugh. I'm like, all right, everything is cool. So, but yeah, so, but that's how I became like, shared hotels and stuff with Jerry Lynn and Mike Enos because of that match right there.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
and going backstage on the road, you obviously became very good friends with Kevin Sullivan and legend
Yeah.
of the game like that. But was there much wrestlers at backstage that you didn't get along with and they kind of treated you as nothing?
Um, there's guys. Luger was kind of an ass back then. Thought he was better than everyone. I mean, a lot of guys were like that till they got to know you. Then it was like, okay. A lot of them were like just real cool. I mean, I was cool with the Steiners, Bagwell, all those guys. I rode with them, and, traveled with them before and stuff like that. Jarrett, all the boys, Harlem Heat. Everyone was pretty cool. You had to realize we spent 3 weeks every single day for 3 weeks in the same. Our we all dressed back then. We all shared the same locker room. It was like a big giant conference room, just chairs in there, and not even tables, just chairs. And we all were in there together. We had monitors. We all watched the wrestling together, so everyone was pretty cool. I mean, you had the obvious, Vader. No one really cared for him. There's very few people that I've spoke to that's ever said any. Actually, my my co-host of my podcast, Kevin Kelly, liked Vader, but he didn't wrestle, so that doesn't really count, I guess. He would always say, "Yeah, no one else liked him, so I felt sorry, so I liked him." Everyone was pretty. Everyone was pretty good. But you have to realize that a lot of them will kind of big shot you when there's other guys around, but you run into them later, one on one, just the two of you. They're like, "Hey, what's up, buddy? How you doing?" I knew Scott Hall really, really well when he was Diamond Stud, you know, and we're about to go. We're traveling to. We're going to go on one of the pay-per-views together, and he called me. He's like, "Hey, man, I don't know if I'm going." I'm like, "Why? What's up? You okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna get my release." He's like, "I just got off. Vince just offered me a job, and what do you think?" I said, "I can't tell you what to do, but they're not doing nothing with you right now." He's like, "Yeah, that's true," and that's when he became Razor Ramon. So and then when he came back. Um, I was, that's when he came back, was when they started doing all the Disney stuff at MGM. Because if you remember, they had in one night, one of the Nitros, they had an outside makeshift arena outside of MGM. You could see palm trees and stuff like that. And I think one of the other Nitros, the very iconic one where Kevin Nash took Rey Mysterio and threw him straight into like the
Oh yeah, I've
trailer,
seen
like a
that.
lawn dart. I was standing right behind them when that happened. So I mean, I was right there, in because I actually Buddy Lee Parker, Sarge, who trained everyone at the power plant. He's like, "Hey man, you want to ring the bell tonight?" He's like, "You get paid like $300." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be the best bell ringer in the world." So I was up like 4 scaffoldings high, so about 35 foot up in the air above everyone, ringing the bell. And they're like, "Yeah, I had the headset on, I could hear everything." They're like, "Whenever someone said ring the bell, just ring the bell." Well, everyone was telling me to ring the bell because there's a bunch of smosh going on in the ring, a bunch of chaos. So I'm ringing the bell like crazy, and it's like I guess the bell is piped right into the audio, so they couldn't really hear the audio over me ringing the bell. So because I was ringing it like crazy, and that's the last time they ever let me ring the bell. So which was fine with me, but yeah. So I mean, I got to be involved in all that kind of stuff, behind the scenes and stuff. So when they see, back to your question, sometimes they might try to big shot you, but when it's just you guys alone and stuff like that, they're they're like, oh. I'll give you an example. Arn Anderson was always really cool. And then I was up there for WWF or WWE having a tryout once. A buddy of mine, D'Lo Brown, got me a tryout. And so we're standing there talking, and Stephanie McMahon walks up, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Stephanie, I'll meet you. A friend of mine. This is Casey Thompson. He's one of the boys from Atlanta." So that's WCW. He's one of the boys from Atlanta back, WCW. So you have an Arn Anderson call you one of the boys is kind of, that's kind of a thing saying, you know what, you made it. You're one of the boys. So, and I think having that is meaning more than making all the money in the world or wherever,
Yeah,
any match or anything. Having someone like that equate you to being equal is like, you know, complete confirmation.
absolutely. Like even when you work with some of the bigger guys like Sting or Vader, even though he wasn't the best to work with, even though he was quite famous, but even when you work with some of them guys, even though they're big stars, it doesn't mean they're any better than you. It just sort of means that they're bigger stars. But to put on a show, I think that you need everybody. A main event guy
Yeah.
just can't be the only person on a show. So each role is so important.
I give you a great example. Sid Vicious, right?
Yeah, no, Sid Vicious. Sick
So
of
I
Sid.
wrestled Sid a lot because I could do all his stuff. I was the first one to ever take his big whirly bird where he takes you like a airplane or a helicopter and you spin flying through the air. I did all that stuff. So um, he left WCW. He's in WWF. I'm booked on the show in WWF. It was somewhere in Florida, Daytona Beach. And I walked in. I went outside. I walked in. I was wrestling the Mountie that night. Piece of cake, easy pea. And then, light. Jock is light as a feather. So Sid's like, "Oh my gosh, you're here!" I'm like, "Yep." He's like, "Oh, I want to wrestle you tonight." I said, "Oh, so sorry, Sid. I'm already wrestling the Mountie." He's like, "Oh, I want to wrestle you." So he grabs my hand. He pulls me over, takes me to the agent, Renee Goulet. I want to wrestle him. No, Sid, the match is already set. Took me to Tony Gurria. Took me to Pat Patterson. Took me all the way to Vince McMahon. I want to wrestle him. He can do all my stuff. No one else can. So he's like, "You know what, Sid? If you want to wrestle him, go ahead. You can wrestle him." So WWF paid you for one time. That's it. So WCW paid you every match. WWF paid you once. So there is one taping out there. I thought they just cut me from the other match. No, there's one taping out there on the same hour. You'll see me wrestle like the first match against the Mountie and the last match against Sid. So about a year or so later, before Sid got the WWF title, he wrestles in a handicap match against me and a guy named Matt Burns, which is actually Rob Van Dam. And so me and Robbie wrestle Sid, and I just had Rob on my show a couple of weeks ago. We were
Yeah,
talking
I saw
about it,
that.
and yeah, and so afterward we took a lot of bumps and stuff, and you can tell which bumps because we called all that stuff because you know we knew what bumps we wanted to take to really put Sid over because we did a good job for him. And so he came up to afterwards and said, "Hey, listen," he said, "I know it's not much, but I just want to show my appreciation to you guys." He says, "I was here, but now because of you, I'm up here." And so he gave us both $20 each. Not a lot of money, it's a little bit back then. He says, "Get yourself some beer, get yourself dinner or something. I just want to show my appreciation. I really appreciate what you guys did for me." So I mean, that was that's kind of cool. So me and Rob were talking about it, and then Rob took it from there and became a WWE Hall of Famer. So, but it's it just goes to show you that it's a brotherhood. We're all the same, no matter if you're first match or last match. We're all
Yeah,
we're all just the boys.
yeah, exactly. And even when wrestling fans call people jobbers, what's your opinion on that word? No, using it enhancement talent, but I don't think wrestling fans understand the importance of enhancement talent. So, what's your opinion on the word jobber?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't I don't take offense to it much because I don't care attitude. I don't care what people think of me. What you see is what you get. And the difference is they're going to call me a jobber, but have you been in the ring with those guys? Have you been on worldwide TV for WWF or WCW or have you been on TV standing right next to Hulk Hogan? Cuz I have. The difference is you're typing about it on a keyboard and I'm doing it. So and the biggest thing is I made a living. I got paid to do it. So call me whatever you want. It went from being job boys to jobbers to uh, enhancement talent to extras to I mean the name changed. They just try to get politically correct. I don't really care. Um, like a good friend of mine, Bob Cook, would say, "I just like to be called the wrestler," and I'm like, so. But the way you look at it, everyone's a job guy because I would do the job for, say, Hugh Morris. Hugh Morris would do the job for, say, Lex Luger. Lex Luger would do the job for Hogan. So back in my day, everyone was a job. Everyone did the job did the job because Hogan was the top guy, or The Rock, or Stone Cold. So everyone does the job. So it's just but it's these guys at home behind their keyboards and keyboard warriors and smart marks and all that stuff that you know they'll say, yeah, but the funny thing is they never say it to your face. I did a podcast once where they're like, "Oh, you're a jobber, this and that," and "Oh, I don't remember your name." I said, "Type in Google Casey Thompson right now." They did it, and they're like, "Holy shit!" Like hundreds of pages come up. I said, "Yeah, it's just what it is." So I don't take offense to it. I did some videos, someone posted up some big overset guy, heavy set guy was doing a drop kick. When he did the drop kick, he smacked his leg because that's the big thing now. Everyone wants to smack their leg to make the sound effect. And I'm like, all I said was, why would you smack your leg on a drop kick? And the guys, so some kid, because they want to attack you on everything. It was just a question. I wasn't being rude. Why? What's
Yeah,
your psychology behind it, right? So he's like, and it was on one of these reels on social media. He's like, well, the better question is, why would you say you're employed by WCW when you only had 6 matches and you never wrestled for WWF? And I'm like, yeah, you want to see my tax returns? That's why, bud. So I don't take offense to it. I'll just kind of laugh. My son's like, you say anything? I said, why? I said, there's no fighting with those people. It's like fighting with people that are diehard WWE fans or diehard AEW fans. How many times you see them fighting about who had more people in the building, taking pictures and stuff. So I take it as all as entertainment. I don't care.
yeah, exactly. All I can do is type while you've actually went out and done this stuff. Um,
Yes.
but when you mentioned our wrestling, the likes of Sid Vicious, and then you nearly wrestled Hulk Hogan, people like that. Who's been your favorite wrestler to work
Yeah.
with?
Oh man, the thing is, I've been in so many of them. Um, on TV, Alex Wright was always fun because we had really, really, really good matches and really very competitive matches. But wrestling Arn Anderson was, you know, it's really hard to pinpoint one person. Um, but I would say on TV would probably be wrestling Alex Wright. But I've wrestled all the Guerreros, all those. I've wrestled everyone, So, but it's Alex was. We were both young at the same time. We're both the same age, and we're young, so and he was really giving. He always believed that he had to sell to make a big comeback as a babyface, to get the sympathy and all that. So it worked out really well. We had really good matches. I just spoke with him a couple days ago, so he's doing really good in Germany. He has his own promotion and everything over there, training guys. Still out there doing the thing, he's grinding away.
Yeah, he's awesome. Um, so working with Alex Wright, and then so working with some of these guys. What's been your favorite? Not even just like favorite person to work with, but your favorite match to have, or one of the most memorable matches.
Um, I wrestled over in South America. I think we were in Peru. Um, one of the local guys were on tour of there, and it's kind of a BS match, but it was a blindfold match. He was the babyface, I was the heel, and so blindfolds. It's all kind of a comedy thing, but we had like such incredible matches where the crowd was participating in everything, and like I'm looking and they're booing and like um I go to get or I go to schoolboy home. I'm actually schoolboying the referee and stuff like that. So we had a lot of fun. Um, I wrestled, had really great matches. Able to wrestle Kevin Sullivan. Like I said, I wrestled Blackjack Mulligan's last match ever. I wrestled Mike Graham one night on a show, and it was an incredible match. Just listen, sitting back, just letting him call the match, and just going out there and wrestling. Um, I had some really good matches against MVP. I helped break him in when he started. Back when he was Antonio Banks in Florida, he wrestled against me and um, my partner was. I was in a group called um, FYU for fuck you up. It's the people announced we killed everyone. There's myself, one of the Blackhearts, and Hack Myers from ECW. We were all in there, so we'd wrestle Hassan MVP all the time. We always had great matches. So I just enjoyed going out there having a great back and forth match with a lot of psychology that made sense. Where you could make the people do what you want. You can make their emotions come out through the way you call the match. Like I said, like a roller coaster. So that's how I enjoyed it, like an old school match. A good setting where it's the light above the ring, the crowd is dark and all that. So It's
Mm.
old school stuff.
It's exactly what you need as well. Especially the current state of wrestling now, you see more just flips and acrobatic
Yeah,
stuff. There's no story behind it. Like you see not a lot in AEW. So
yeah,
I think the old school style is probably the best. Getting your babyface comeback, things like that.
yeah. I totally agree. But wrestling's evolved, and that's what they do now. So, um, as you can see with AEW, they're very talented. They're athletes. But what's their shelf life? There's so many injuries. So many guys are out right now. They're not going to last 20 years. The thing that's lucky for them, they're only wrestling a couple times a week, if that. Compared to people that were wrestling 300 days a year. So all the old timers always say, "You got a bump card, kid. Don't be punching all those bumps." And I never knew what they meant. And boy, I wake up every day and I'm like, whoa, I know exactly what they meant now.
Yeah. Do you wish that you didn't take as much bumps?
What's that?
Do you wish that you didn't take as much bumps?
Yeah, I think I wish that I took more selective bumps, you know, for the right time, appropriate, you know, like you have guys that color every time they're in a match, they cut their head in front of 20 people, but there's nothing that dictated them to do it. So I wish I would have been more selective, taking bigger bumps, taking bigger risk, and for 25 years down the road when you feel every one of them.
Yeah, you feel it way after it, and
Yeah.
for on the road trips and stuff. And I suppose you have some very funny memories and very memorable memories on road trips and being backstage. So, what's your funniest or most memorable memory on road trips or being backstage?
Oh man, I can give you one for WCW. WCW is ones who brought to the main stage, brought all the luchadors, and the Steiners, especially Scotty Steiner, loved to torment all the luchadors. So um, I can't tell how many times I would see a luchador duct taped to a chair, that he duct tape, and they'd be taped up all day because no one would dare undo them, and they'd push them around all day. We've had it where guys have been on the rollaway beds and we pushed them out into the elevator down into a parking lot, and then all of a sudden got a storm and they about froze half to death because they were all passed out, woke up in the middle of the morning with freezing to death because their rollaway bed that they're on sleeping is in the parking lot. So all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So you name it, I've seen it. So I've been around for a bunch of that kind of stuff, but yeah, the Steiners would always torment the luchador, so that was always funny.
And were the Steiners always fun to be with backstage?
Um, Scott was very moody. Rick was really cool. I got along with him as long as you could take the Frankensteiner. Scotty was fine. If you messed up the Frankensteiner, he was going to kill you.
And did you ever take the Frankenstein?
Yeah, I know how to take it. I didn't get killed. Yeah.
And with your time in WCW, and you mentioned there like road trips and being with some of the biggest wrestlers possible, like, and you said there you met the actual Hulk Hogan. So what was Hulk Hogan like backstage?
Um, he was just very business oriented. He'd come in and walk in. He would shake your hand. He would if you walked up to shake his hand. He's not going to walk up to shake your hand. Well, but that's rightfully so because out of respect, I should walk up and shake his hand. So he'd walk. I'd walk up. Hey, how you doing, Hulk? Hey, how you doing, brother? So he was very respectful like that. So um, he was just very business. You know, but I got to know Hawk more because Kevin Sullivan was good friends with him, and Kevin Sullivan had the gyms down in the Keys, and Hogan came did the grand opening for him, and I was there for everything. So he was a good guy. He took care of his boys, which is cool. Everyone's like, oh, Brutus, or the knobs and all this stuff, but you got to say something for someone that no matter what, always took care of his boys, and Hulk always did that. So he's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy on Hulk Hogan. But I just think you can't deny some of the stuff he's done for wrestling. A lo- through a lot of the times he defended the era of pro wrestling. And you can't take that away from him, no matter if you like the man or not.
Yeah. You know what? If it wasn't for Hulk, we wouldn't be talking right now.
No, probably not.
Guarantee you. Yeah.
And so then when you left WCW, why was it that you left WCW?
They went out of business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You
No, a
you
lot
worked
of
in a
guys didn't really have a choice.
mm, you worked in a very good era of wrestling.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best eras of wrestling. Although maybe weren't the biggest star at that time, like Hulk or whatever, you still did go through that kind of era. What was it like being through that amazing era of pro wrestling?
I look back at it now. A lot of my podcasts, on YouTube, In Ring Wrestling Podcast, is myself and Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly, if you guys don't know, he was the announcer in WWF. All those interviews with The Rock, that was Kevin Kelly. So he was there during the Attitude Era for Monday Night Wars. I was in WCW, so we talk about it a lot. We're always like amazed how like this is our life. Like we were involved, associated with all that stuff. So it's sometimes it's like you're living a dream. Like wow, I really did that. You know. So we might not have been the biggest people in the world or this or that, but still, when you talk about it, yeah, I was a part of it. So yeah, it's cool. It's special. It makes to where I have a podcast now where I have a voice because um, I always ask Kevin Sullivan because I started doing a lot of podcasts. I'm like, Kevin, why are they calling me? I says, because everyone's dying, or he's like, you know what, Casey? He says, you were involved in wrestling during the biggest biggest time of wrestling ever. He said, you're involved. So you have a point of view. People want to hear your perspective of what, because you can hear what the star says and what someone else says, but everyone has a different perspective. Mine's going to be truthful because I have nothing to gain and nothing to lose for telling my stories, so I tell it from how I saw everything. So it's fun. It's cool.
Yeah, and you obviously have lots of experiences to share. No matter if you were Hulk Hogan or if you even though you weren't the Hulk Hogan of the business, you still have a lot of stories to
Yeah.
share. So see when WC, I'm wondering about this. So when WCW went out of business, where did you go after that? Was that when you became a promoter?
I My son was born in 2003, and I had to go out of the country. I did a lot of overseas stuff, so I had to go out of the country, and I was just miserable. I'm like, I didn't. I've seen so many guys over the years not having a relationship with their kids because they're on the road so much. I give an example: Ric Flair, his son Reed, the one that passed away. I remember, I think I was in like North Carolina, South Carolina, and I'm walking the hallway, and this kid stops me and says, "Hey, you're Casey Thompson." And I'm like, "Yeah," and you're Ric Flair's kid. Ric Flair's kid knew me by name. I was like, my boys were like, "Wow, that's pretty funny." So it's so he was born, and I didn't want to miss out being a father. I was on the road a couple hundred days a year, so you're going to miss something. You're going to miss a lot of stuff. So I just said, you know what? I'm done. And I quit wrestling. And then I the opportunity arose where first it was myself, D'Lo Brown, and um, a guy a money guy. And then D'Lo stayed around for a little bit, and he stopped. It was just me and my partner, which was very good friends to this day. Um, we ran a company called MXPW, and we ran television for a couple years down in it was on the Sunshine Network, Fox Sports. I think it was in over in Sky over in Europe. It was all over the world, and we had all. I mean, we had everyone from Dusty Rhodes to Barry Windham to D'Lo Raven and AJ Styles. You know, man, all everyone, anyone from TNA had been through our shows, big names and everything. I kind of whittled it down, and I used Norman Smiley, Chaz from the Headbangers, the Warlord, um, Dennis Knight, who was one of the Godwins, because they're all local. They had a little recognition behind them, and I didn't have to pay for all the flights and hotels because they're lived in Florida. So I used all those guys and just started writing and producing TV. So that's a lot of work because I had to produce it every week, had to write it, book all the venues. I was a one man show, did everything. But I mean, a lot of guys got jobs because of my show. And I always wanted to help elevate the boys because I was one of the boys for the longest time. So, um, I'd always help them. So when Tommy Dreamer was in talent relations in WWF, he'd call me, "Hey, what's up, this kid Brian?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, he's cool. He's in TNA now. What's his name? Kong, Khan, Kon, Khan. He was one of the. He wasn't. I think he was the when they did the LOD 2.0 in WWE.
Oh, I
Um,
know what you mean. I know the series that you mean.
Yeah, he was one of them, and then he was in went to singles, and then he left, and I guess he's in TNA now. He got a job for me, MVP. He sent up my tapes that he was on to get shows, to get they all called and asked me about. So I was always try to help people,
Do you mean
so because that's
do you
what.
mean Colt Cabana?
No, no, no. This is a
No.
big guy. He wrestled as Ryan O'Reilly, as an
Oh,
Irish guy, and then he what is his name? I can never think of all this stuff because it's but yeah, he is his name is Connor Big Con.
Big Con. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, he wrestles in TNA.
yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah. So but so I helped a lot of guys. I still do, do now I just do the podcast and just all we do is just there's no preparation. We don't do it, we just turn it on and we have a conversation and we just
Yep.
tell stories. So, and it seems
And
to work well for us. It's, we're growing little by little. So, that's why we get out here to help promote the show and tell our stories. And it's fun. It's
yeah,
our way of
exactly.
giving back now.
Yeah. When when I do a podcast again, I prepare for nothing. Um, I maybe prepare for how I set up the show or something, but for conversations, it's better not to lay out 100 questions because it's better to have more of an organic, more fluid
Oh yeah.
conversation
Very
instead of
organic. Yeah,
laying out 100 questions.
absolutely. Yeah. 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 So it's fun. Oh, I see you have Gangrel back there in your picture, right?
Yep. And grill.
Yeah. He was one of my regular guys. Me and Dave, we started together, so I mean, I used all those guys like that. So it's yeah, it was just fun. It was a good TV show. It lasted for about 2 years, and then I was just too much going on. I had two kids then, and I just all about my kids. My son started wrestling at 5 years old, amateur, and wrestled all over the world. Internationally. He won the Pan American Championships, and he went to college, wrestling in college. Now my daughter's in college, and my son's out, and he's a police officer. So life is good.
Awesome. And when you began your promotion, um, when you were doing it, did you find many egos who were kind of like, "I'm too big for this. I need to win," um, that kind of thing?
Yeah, a couple guys here and there, but yeah, yeah. There's a few, not many. Most guys were pretty. The guys I picked were all professionals, so they wouldn't act like that. And I had a motto because a lot of people would have like, oh, ticket sellers on there. If they sold tickets, they'd be get on. I Perception's everything. So I wanted people to perceive my show to be in big time. So they walked in and the ring looks all buttoned up and the ropes are tight, the ring aprons are tight, the chairs are straight. You have lights and entrance, all that stuff. People are like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. and all my guys looked like wrestler. They had gears, they had boots, all that stuff. So um, I had a model that this is, this isn't like in the U.S. that Little League baseball. This isn't Little League. Everyone doesn't get to play. So in Little League, they let everyone play, and they get participation ribbons for playing. So
Mm.
mine was, this isn't Little League. Everyone doesn't get to play. So if you don't fit what I need, I'm not going to use you. I'm not going to lower my standards because you can sell me a bunch of tickets. I rather have a good quality show. So that's how I did everything.
That's how I think should work. A lot of people try to get in some of the biggest stars, but maybe they can't work as well as they used to. Um, so thankfully, you were able to um, bring in some very good talent, very top notch talent. Who was the best talent that you trained from that place?
Guys that were on my shows. I mean, I had everyone. You go through the list. You have guys like I said, Gangrel, AJ Styles. I mean, guys that are my regulars. You had Norman Smiley. He trains everyone at
Yeah,
NXT now. I tell Norman. Norman got the job at NXT from WWE because of me. I was talking to my buddy Joe Gomez that wrestled, and he's like, "Yeah, Billy Kidman just got a job from Kern, training for WWE." I'm like, oh wow. I said, yeah, they're looking for one more guy. He's like, too bad you couldn't do it, but because you had to move to Tampa and all that stuff. And he's like, I said, I know who would be perfect for it. He's like, who? I said, Norman Smiley's. Oh my gosh, you're right. So as soon as I hung up, I called Norman. I said, Norman, here, call this number. I said, this is what Kidman's getting paid, so you'll know how to negotiate this, that. And he's there. He got the job. I talk to him every once in a while. He's doing great. He's went through about 10 different versions of WWE, still lasting, through it all. So, but I used everyone, you know, um, from Dusty Rhodes to Shane Douglas, Raven. New Jack was a regular of mine actually, and
yeah,
which I know that's a very um, could be very scary
controversial.
for a lot of promoters because New Jack does a bunch of crazy stuff. But New Jack always acted right on my shows. Actually, one of those things when he stabbed some kid up in um, like a bunch of times,
Oh yeah,
I got the click call from jail, wanted me to bail him out of jail and everything. So, but he never acted up. He always did really good business for me. I took care of everyone, paid everyone. Luna Vachon was on all my shows. So she's a legend in her own, right? So I had all those people. It was it was good. You you surround yourself with greatness. Greatness is going to rub off, and that's what I wanted too. I wanted greatness to rub off on my young guys that were working for me to help elevate them and for them to grow and get better, and they did. So it was good stuff.
yeah. And I suppose that kind of happened to you. You hung around with a top talent, and then you got better being around them kind of guys, and you kind of tried to pass that on. Would it be right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the nature of the business. That's how it's
Yep.
supposed to work.
And then nowadays we're seeing quite a lot of old wrestlers like Maven, who wasn't as well known as most of the guys. I knew who he was, but just a lot of people might not have. And he became a
Right.
YouTuber. Um, he shared his experiences, and then you came along as well with the in ring wrestling podcast. Do you think this is a good way of more of the lesser known people getting to be more known and more deserved for their experiences?
Because you're not out there, killing your body. I mean, we're not, maybe wrestled a couple months ago, but he's like, it was real quick in and out. He's not able to do all that stuff. He doesn't want to do that stuff. I'm not able or want to. So we can contribute to the business by talking about our experiences and stuff we know, and can help advise. I help advise young kids all the time on what they need to do and stuff like that. So it's the way of giving back to the business, and I'm sure he's making a very good income from it. He has a nice following. So, and that's the goal for everyone is eventually to monetize and make money off of it.
Yep. I can see you being there maybe sometime as well. I think it's very interesting some of the stuff that you've done. You've done a
Mm.
podcast with Rob Van Dam, uh, things like that. So I wish you all the best on that.
Oh, thank you.
And again, if you want to check out this In Ring Wrestling podcast, it's the same for all the socials and on YouTube, just at
Yes.
In Ring Wrestling Podcast, plain and simple.
Yes. Thank you so much. This has been
Mitch,
fun.
yeah, thanks very much for coming on. And I have one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
Uh, so what's next for Casey Thompson?
Um, this is it. Just sharing my experiences with everyone else. I help out. I do a little consulting. There's a group in Australia that I help consult with, and for their television show and all that. And I just try to give back to the business from what I've learned from my experiences, because I was fortunate enough to have some of the greatest minds in the business to teach me. Now I can share my teachings with the next generation. So,
Awesome.
that's what I'm doing.
And what advice would you give to a young trainee wrestler trying to start out in wrestling?
Go to college and get a real job. Wrestling sucks. No, I meant just everything matters. Your gear, your appearance, your having a tan, everything from A to Z has to be locked in. If you want to make it, you got to live the life. The life has to be. You have to look like you belong. If you do that, you'll be okay. Because it doesn't matter how good you are, because it's all about being in the right place at the right time. Them thinking about something as they walk out that door and see and say, "Oh, come here, kid." It's easy as that. So just be respectful. Just you know, just just keep grinding.
Great advice. Well, thank you, Casey, for coming on to this podcast. This has been a really fascinating one. Hearing stories from WCW guys. You run your own promotion, so you've done very well for yourself in the game. And I wish you all the best with the next podcast and stuff.
Oh, thanks for having me. I had a pleasure today. It was
Thank
fun.
you. Thanks. But so as for the next Kayfabe with Keaton, that was great episode with Casey Thompson. Really enjoyed that one. Um, as for the next Kayfabe with Keaton, we'll have coming on none other than Mad Dog Mike Angus. We've been trying to get him on for a while. Had a lot of different bookings with him. But Mike Angus is the owner of Wrestle Tours. It's where wrestling fans can get their tours for cheap prices, and they can get flew over in the best way of accommodations. So, and he's also the ring announcer for Progress Wrestling and stuff. So this will be a great episode. And for the next NIPW show, there's three big shows coming up. NIPW Breakout 9. Um, that's on Sunday the 9th of November, 2 p.m. Um, then we'll have NIPW, their very Christmas special in the Grand Social in Bangor. The doors open at 3 p.m. and starts at 4 p.m. On the 7th of December. And for possibly NIPW's biggest show, if you want to have a Christmas present for your kids because of the uh, scandalous prices of WWE, the day before Monday Night Raw in Belfast, if you couldn't get tickets or if you just couldn't afford the prices, NIPW Sunday Night Shockwave for only £12, you can buy your tickets for that, and that will be in Shaftesbury REC Belfast. All these shows and you can get them the tickets for them at nipw.sumupstore.com. So make sure to get your tickets for that. Uh, Thanks very much for everyone that tuned in, and that was a great episode with Casey Thompson. And hopefully we'll see you for the next one on Wednesday with Mad Dog Big Angus. Bye for now.